RL102 Basic Russian Grammar Part 1
Основы грамматики русского языка, часть первая.
With Victor D. Huliganov. Copyright www.huliganov.com 2007. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, or not evening if you're not watching in the evening. This is lesson 2 in this series. This time we will teach a little bit more, or talk a little bit more about modes of address in Russian today. And then we will go on and look at 5 verbs of the most easy category of conjugation, the so-called 1A category. And we will look at 4 common adverbs, as well as 5 other short words, some of which you may remember from the first course. With no further ado, let me go into the first part of the lesson, which is forms of address. There are 5 levels of formality in Russian. The first level is to call somebody Mr. or Mrs. something. That's господин и госпожа. This is very rarely used these days. Prior to the revolution, people did use this as Mr. in the similar way to the way Mr. is used, or the equivalent in most of the Western European languages. It became replaced by the word comrade or товарищ during the revolution, and now that the form товарищ has fallen largely into disuse, not entirely, but largely into disuse, we have now only really the use of господин and госпожа, followed by the surname, for foreigners, and also for people very high ranking. You might, for example, call either Mr. Putin or Mr. Lukashenko, you might call them господин президент, for example. But normally, if you wouldn't call a Russian that you met, if you meet Mr. Popov, you won't normally address him as господин Popov. It sounds very pretentious, and probably there will be laughter if you use this form too commonly when you're speaking Russian. It will seem very quaint indeed. So, in order to actually show respect to the people that you meet, that you want to show some more formality, more degree of respect to, the form is used the name, their first name, and the patronymic, which is the name of their father, followed by ovich or yevich if it's soft. In the form of in the case of a woman, it is ovna or yevna. There will be more on the forming of the patronymic in a future lesson. I don't want to get bogged down in it right now, but that's the second level of formality, and one very commonly used if you, for example, have a teacher or somebody who is your boss at work. Usually you will be calling them by their name, first name, and patronymic. The next level down, if you like, is to be calling them with their name only, but still to be calling them вы. If you're calling them with their name and their patronymic, or calling them, as you very rarely would, господин, all of this will be with вы, the form вы that we learned last time. But you can still call people вы and just their name, their first name, and often foreigners which have no patronymic are addressed in this way. The next level down, after you will have drunk the Bruderschaft with somebody and consumed perhaps a small amount of alcohol, linked arms, and with the arms linked together you drink a small amount of alcohol, maybe not so small, maybe, you know, if you're a recovering alcoholic, you might do it with something other than alcohol. You know, if you are, you know, it's not absolutely de rigueur to drink alcohol all the time in Russia these days. You know, it's a modern country these days, more or less. So after this happens, you'll probably go to T, and probably still be T plus imya, which is the first name, or you might start to go to the smaller, the shorter form of the name. Of course, the shorter form of the name is usually longer, but that doesn't really matter. The short form of the name is, for example, if you have Ivan, then the short form is Vanya. In the case of Victor, it is Vitya. In the case of Alexander, it is Sasha. Usually it is ending in a or ya, but it's not a lady's name. Even though it has like a feminine form, having an ending in a or ya, it is still a masculine form. Okay, in the case of women, of course, as well, it has an ending in a or ya. Okay, Olga would become Oля, Irina will become Ira. Okay, these are the short forms of the name, and that is basically as informal as it gets. You are usually going to be on T when you are using these shortened forms, these nickname forms of the name, and every Russian name has a form. So if you have something like Vladimir, it will be Ty Volodya. You'll be using the Volodya form from Vladimir in the case of somebody that you are speaking to with V. You will never be mixing those up. So you see that gradually the various forms change as you go towards a greater level of informality. That was a little bit about the various modes of address in Russian. I will come back to these issues later on in the course, but if you listen to this a few times, you will get the drift of it. Okay, last time we spoke about I, you, he, she, it, we, you, they, я, ты, он, она, оно, мы, вы, они. Okay, and now we have to put a verb to it. I suggest that we start with the verb знать, which is a useful verb to know, because it means know. It is even cognate with the word know in English, but if you want to know how that works, you'll have to study the behavior of the velars in Proto-Indo-European. I don't suggest you need to get bogged down in that at the moment, but it's interesting if you want to go back to it. There's articles on Wikipedia about why that is. That something could be know in English, gnosko in Greek, and znać in Slavonic. Okay, it is cognate. Now, znać in Russian means to know both a person, to be acquainted with somebody, and also to know a thing. So it has the same territory, if you like, as the English word to know. It is not like many languages which have a separate word to know a person and a separate to know a fact. For example, connaître and savoir in French, or kennen and wissen in German, or wiedzieć i znać in Polish, or conocer, saber in Spanish. In Russian, it is only the one word znать covers to know in all circumstances. So it is a useful word to know. Okay, let's take it through the conjugation. Okay, я знаю, I know. Okay, знать is the infinitive, to know. Мне нужно знать, I need to know. Take the t, the soft t of the end, and add you, and you get the first person singular form. Я знаю. Okay, я знаю, ты знаешь, I know, you know. He, she, it knows, он, она, оно знает. Okay, it's not that often that you'll have something in оно which knows something, because оно is neutral, it knows. Normally it's things which don't really get to know things, because it's inanimates usually, but it could happen. And so you can also say, if you want to use a third person's name, for example, Victor знает. You will use just in English. You say he, she, it knows, and Victor knows, and you have the s on the end. The same if you want to talk about somebody in the third person. You also use the same он, она, оно, или Victor, или Саша, или Ольга знает. Okay, we know, мы знаем. Okay, and you plural or polite, вы знаете, you know. And they know, они знают. So there you have it. Знаю, знаешь, знает, знаем, знаете, знают. If you learned Latin verbs, you probably might even recognize some certain similarities between the old amo, amas, amat, amamus, amatis, amant, and what you have here. The similarities are in fact very close, but there have been sound changes which make it not as obvious as it would be. In fact, it is very, very close to the Latin forms which I just mentioned for amare, to love. Okay, so let's just have a look at another couple of these verbs. These are the verbs in 1a. Okay, this is the simplest conjugation you get. All you need to do is remove the soft t, the t at the end from the infinitive, and then add the you, yesh, yet, yem, yetje, and yut. Okay, sometimes you will find that in the first conjugation verbs, if there is a stress on the end, that you have a yo instead of the ye in the second person and third person singular and first and second person plural. These can happen. If you have a stress, you have yo instead of ye. But otherwise, first conjugation is always with the ye in those positions. Okay? And basically 1a is the simplest form because you don't have any changes to the root. You're just taking off the soft t at the end and adding those endings. Let's try it again for another couple of verbs. Работать. This means to work. Я работаю. I work. Ты работаешь. Он, она, оно работает. Мы работаем. Вы работаете. Они работают. You see, it's very regular. Let's try it one more time. For to do. Делать. Делать. Я делаю, I do, or I am doing. Remember, this is the present tense, and it is the same for I do or I am doing. There's no difference between those two in Russian. It's even the same as I do. Я делаю, ты делаешь, он делает, она делает, мы делаем, вы делаете, они делают. Please notice the stress is on the first syllable in делать and stays that way through the whole of the verb conjugation, and in работать it was always on the second and stays that way through the entire conjugation. Okay, let's just add in a little bit of other vocabulary and we can make some sentences up. For example, you probably remember the adverbs много, a lot, and мало, a little. I try to teach these as opposites. Okay? Хорошо means well, and плохо means badly. If you want to say I don't do something, you don't have this form of I don't do, I don't work. In English you say I don't work, I do not work. In Russian you don't put that into the same form. In fact, not only in Russian, but in almost any language you could think of. English has a problem. If you only know English and you don't know anything but English, you have to get your head around this. English has something called the periphrastic do, which means you're saying do, but you don't really mean making something with your hands. Okay? It has the filling in form. Okay? In Old English, if you even read the King James Bible, you would see something like this. Consider the lilies of the field. They toil not, neither do they spin. Okay? It doesn't say they don't work. It says they work not, they toil not. Okay? And this is how English used to be. In fact, German to this day. Ich arbeite nicht. I don't work. They don't say ich tue nicht arbeiten. Okay? They say ich arbeite nicht, I work not. In Russian you say I not work. Я не работаю. You don't say я делаю не работать. I do not work, literally. You say я не работаю. So if you only know English, if you know other languages already, you probably think I'm talking the obvious. But as a lot of people watching this, they only know English and they might be really surprised to know that when you're talking in the foreign language, that funny structure, I do not do this, is actually completely redundant. It never developed in any other language but English. It is really unique in English, and nobody really knows why the periphrastic do developed. There have been various papers about it, but nobody really knows why this happened. Okay, that English developed this strange construction, but nevertheless it's there in English, not there in Russian. So I don't do something is simply I not do something. Okay, I don't work, я не работаю. It's actually quite simple. Я не работаю, ты не делаешь, you don't do it, ты не делаешь это. Я не знаю, I don't know. You probably won't hear a Russian person saying that very much. It's hard for them to admit it. But it is grammatically correct to say я не знаю. It's something that sometimes people need to be able to really force themselves to admit sometimes. Он не знает, you'll hear an awful lot more frequently. He doesn't know. So this is how you would say how not to do something. Very simple. Okay? Also is тоже. Okay? And it doesn't matter. In English you have this problem. You would say I don't know and you don't know either because it's a negative. I do know and you do know too or also. You have a different word. In Russian it doesn't matter. You can say тоже all the time. There's